Ed Gein. On November 16, 1957, a cold wind swept through Plainfield, Wisconsin. The small town was quiet, its streets dusted with early snow. Inside Worden's hardware store, 58-year-old Bernice Worden arranged tools on the counter, the sound of a radio faint in the background. Outside, the sky was gray and footsteps crunched through the snow as a familiar customer approached. It was Ed Gein, a quiet, solitary farmer, known around town for doing odd jobs and keeping to himself. Around mid-morning, a single shotgun blast echoed across Main Street. A passing driver noticed the door of the store standing open, but saw no one inside. By evening, townspeople grew uneasy. Worden hadn't returned home and her truck was missing. When her son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden, entered the store, he found the register drawer pulled out, a trail of blood leading to the back room, and one receipt resting near the counter. That night, a convoy of police cars drove the long, frozen road to Gein's farmhouse. The property was silent, except for the creak of an old windmill and the flicker of a lantern inside the barn. Officers split up, some went to the house, others to the outbuildings. When Sheriff Art Schley pushed open the barn door, the beam of his flashlight caught a shape swinging from a wooden rafter. It was the missing woman, hanging upside down, her torso opened like a hunter's kill. Inside the house, investigators moved slowly through the cluttered rooms. Curtains were drawn tight, and the smell of decay filled the air. What looked at first like ordinary household items revealed themselves to be something else entirely. Lampshades, stitched from skin, bowls carved from skulls, masks fashioned from human faces. In a small back bedroom stood a mannequin draped in tanned flesh. The officers worked in silence, photographing each discovery under the harsh glare of flashbulbs. Gein himself was found sitting in the kitchen, dressed in a flannel shirt and worn overalls, a calm expression on his face. He answered questions politely as deputies led him outside into the freezing air. Under the pale moonlight, reporters gathered at the fence line, their cameras flashing as police sealed off the property. By dawn, Plainfield's streets were filled with news vans and curious onlookers, staring toward the farmhouse that had turned an ordinary town into the center of one of America's most disturbing crime scenes. As the horror of Plainfield faded into legend, another predator would emerge decades later, not hiding in the shadows but walking calmly among his victims with nothing more than a smile and a name: Ted Bundy. On July 14, 1974, near Lake Sammamish State Park in Washington, the air was warm and filled with laughter. Families picnicked under tall pine trees while boats drifted lazily across the water. Among the crowd moved a man with a gentle smile and his arm in a sling. He introduced himself as Ted. He asked young women for help loading his small sailboat onto his car. Two of them agreed, and were never seen again. That evening, as the sun set, police searched the park. Both women's cars were still parked where they had left them, towels and handbags on the seats. Witnesses described the man clearly: tall, dark-haired, wearing a white shirt, his arm in a fake cast. Sketches appeared across Seattle the next day. In the months that followed, disappearances spread across Washington, Oregon, and Utah. Bundy's light-colored Volkswagen Beetle became the one detail connecting the victims. When investigators searched the car, they found a tire iron, handcuffs, and nylon rope hidden beside the seat. In 1975, Bundy was arrested in Utah during a routine traffic stop. But before trial, he escaped through a courthouse window, vanishing into a snowstorm. Months later, he surfaced in Florida. On January 15, 1978, at Florida State University, screams echoed through a sorority house just after 2 a.m. 2 students were found bludgeoned to death, 2 others beaten unconscious. Bundy fled, only to abduct a 12-year-old girl days later in Lake City. On February 15th, police in Pensacola pulled over a stolen car. Bundy fought as officers dragged him from the driver's seat. Cameras flashed as he was taken into custody, calm and defiant. Evidence from the Florida murders, bite marks, fibers, footprints, would finally expose him. The charming stranger from Lake Sammamish had become one of America's most infamous killers. While Bundy hunted alone, another nightmare was unfolding on the opposite coast, one led not by a single man's hands, but by his voice, his followers, and his control over their minds. Charles Manson. On August 8, 1969, in Los Angeles, California, darkness fell over Benedict Canyon as a beat-up car wound its way up the narrow road to 10,050 Silo Drive. Inside sat 4 followers of Charles Manson, obeying an order: "Destroy everyone inside!" Just after midnight, the quiet hillside erupted with gunfire. A young man in a white sports car was shot in the driveway as he tried to flee. The intruders cut the phone lines and slipped into the brightly lit home. In the living room, actress Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, pleaded for her life. Her friends, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Wojciech Frykowski, were bound as chaos tore through the house. Outside, the night was eerily silent. A few neighbors later recalled faint cries carried by the wind. but dismissed them as party noise. By morning, sunlight revealed a blood-smeared door and bodies sprawled across the living room floor. The word pig was written in red on the front door. Police arrived at a scene of quiet horror. Detectives stepped carefully through shattered glass and overturned furniture. Photographers worked under flashlights, documenting every wall, every symbol, every wound. The following night, across town, another family, the LaBiancas, were killed in the same ritualistic manner. Detectives traced the evidence to Spawn Ranch, a desert compound where Manson and his followers lived among broken movie sets. When officers raided the site, they found the group gathered in silence, Manson in the center, his hair hanging over his eyes as the handcuffs clicked shut. Years after the chaos of the Manson murders, America would face a new kind of darkness. Jeffrey Dahmer. On July 22, 1991 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the humid night pressed against the buildings as police sirens faded in the distance. Two patrol officers were finishing their rounds when a man burst from an apartment complex on North 25th Street. His wrist was still bound by a metal handcuff, his voice breaking as he shouted that someone inside had tried to kill him. The officers followed him back to the building. The hallway was dim and silent, except for the faint buzz of a fluorescent light. The smell of spoiled meat drifted through the air as they knocked on the door of apartment 213. A quiet voice answered, steady and calm. When the door opened, Jeffrey Dahmer stood there, shirtless, his skin glistening under the weak light. The officers stepped inside. One of them glanced toward an open drawer and froze. Inside were dozens of Polaroid photographs showing dismembered bodies arranged in deliberate poses. He called for backup. The other officer opened the refrigerator and stepped back immediately. A human head rested on a shelf beside condiments and a carton of milk. The freezer held packages neatly wrapped and labeled with dates. A large blue barrel in the corner gave off the unmistakable smell of decay. Within minutes, the building filled with officers, photographers, and reporters gathering outside. Inside the small apartment, flashbulbs burst against yellowed wallpaper as investigators cataloged each discovery: skulls in cabinets, bones soaking in chemicals, and photographs scattered on the floor. Neighbors stood in the street below, staring up at the windows as stretchers and evidence boxes were carried out. The humid air clung to the crowd. No one spoke. In the back of a patrol car, Dahmer sat motionless, his face blank, as red and blue lights pulsed across the windshield. Albert Fish. On June 3, 1928, in Manhattan, New York City, the afternoon sun glowed over West 15th Street. Children played on stoops as a thin, gray-haired man watched quietly from across the road. Albert Fish, known to neighbors only as Mr. Howard. That day, he visited the Budd family after answering a newspaper ad for farm work. He spoke softly, promising steady pay and a train ride to the countryside. When he met 10-year-old Grace Budd, he smiled and said there was a birthday party for his niece nearby. Wearing a white dress and a red ribbon, Grace walked beside him down the street and vanished. By nightfall, her mother was searching every block, calling her name through the alleys. Years later, in 1934, police traced a letter back to Fish. Inside his small room, they found clippings, tools, and the quiet killer sitting calmly by the window as officers closed in.